Yeah, let's go ahead and get started. Thanks everybody for coming. Hey everybody, I'm Adam Hart, a curator for Media Burn, and I'm thrilled to help kick off a new series of virtual events. We've been doing our virtual talks with video activists since 2020, and we're excited to start them back up again. As some of you know from personal experience, last year we culminated several years of work digitizing and sharing tapes from the first decade of independent video with a giant symposium at the University of Chicago that brought together dozens of video makers, including several of you here, from around the country to discuss and celebrate the guerrilla television movement. And then we needed just a little breather as far as events go. But we're back, and we'll be back every month in the new year with more talks with important pioneering artists from throughout the history of independent video. So most of you know us at MediaBurn, I assume, but we are an independent nonprofit dedicated to saving and sharing the history of independent community-based video. You can find thousands of videos on our website, and we're very excited that very soon that website will be much easier to search and browse. We're launching a new website in just a few short months, and we're extremely excited about it. You'll be hearing a lot about that in the future, I promise. And apologize in advance. So we cover a lot of ground at Media Burn, the full history of independent video from the 1960s to today, and we will always maintain that inclusive, expansive philosophy. But tonight's event is the kickoff for a new program focusing on the early history of women video makers. We'll be doing more events with video makers like Nina Sobel, who is here tonight, and Joan Logue, and announcing more collections that will be coming to Media Burn. All of this is thanks to the amazing work of Media Burn Executive Director Sarah Chapman and our archivists who spend all day in the digitization mines, Dan Erdman and Max Hart. Hey, Max. As well as to the work of friends like the truly dedicated and brilliant scholar Helena Shashkovich and artist Susan Milano, among many others who have passed along the word about Media Burn and helped us out along the way. So thanks, everybody. Media Burn remains committed to saving video history and sharing it with the world, particularly those nooks and crannies of the history that deserve more attention and a real global audience. So a bit of business. Closed captions are available on Zoom, and if you want to view captions, go to the bottom of your screen by the mute button, where one of the options is captions. Just click on that. Otherwise, please remain muted. This event is being recorded and will be available to watch on our website soon. So for tonight's event, we'll be screening a series of short videos and excerpts of videos from the great Susan Mogul, followed by a conversation moderated by the equally great Alexandra Juhasz, with room for questions and friendly conversation from the audience. So let me quickly introduce Susan. She is a pioneering feminist video artist and multimedia artist who has so often achieved that incredibly difficult balance of being both emphatically political and hysterically funny. Um, she began working in the early 1970s, where after studying with Judy Chicago at Cal Arts, she worked in a variety of mediums while becoming a central figure in the Los Angeles video scene and the feminist art scene of the 1970s. Her video work would take many forms over the subsequent years, often finding new and surprising ways of approaching autobiography, mixing memoir and personal musings with a wide range of styles, genres, and mediums, including installation art, performance, and photography. Her work has been exhibited and screened around the world, including the Getty, the Pompidou, the Kunsthaus Graz, and the Austrian Film Museum. Her 2008 documentary, Driving Men, played to great acclaim at film festivals around the world. And in 2022, a major career-spanning survey of Mogul's work titled Susan Mogul, What Becomes a Legend Most, was mounted at Warsaw's Zachita National Gallery of Art. So with that, I'd like to introduce Susan Mogul.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you for the invitation. Um, I'm just going to do a brief introduction. I'm just gonna start, okay? And my speaking is going to be limited to a few minutes, about 3 minutes before we show some excerpts of some 70s work, and then I'm going to talk a little bit more about them. And then we have a couple of excerpts from two films from the 21st century. So I wanted to tell you about my introduction to video and the video portapak. In January 1973, I moved to Los Angeles, 3,000 miles from home, to study with Judy Chicago in the feminist art program at Cal Arts. This program was the only program of its kind in the United States, and a precept or slogan of the feminist movement in general, that most of you probably know, was that the personal was the political. So we were encouraged and expected to make art about our life, and no subject was off limits. At that same time when I was there, I entered in January of 73, that same time, Linda Benglis, a hot shit New York sculptor, came to Cal Arts as a visiting artist. I signed up to do an independent study with Linda, frankly, because she was a hot shit New York artist. Turns out she had just started making videos herself and told me that's what I should do. I had never seen any video art and never seen a portapak or heard of video art. Cal Arts, the reason she was able to suggest this, because Cal Arts was the only art school, or one of a handful of art schools in the country that had video equipment. So Cal Arts was the place where I was turned on to both feminist art and video at the same moment. And that led to storytelling. I put the camera on a tripod, turned on the recorder, and started talking. The following 4 titles are shown in chronological order. They're all from the 70s. 3 are excerpts, and 1 title, Mogul is Mobile Redux, which originally was 10 minutes, but a few years ago I cut it down to 4 minutes. These excerpts and Mogul Mobile in its entirety will make up about 12 to 13 minutes. So let's play those excerpts, and one it's in its entirety.
My mother brought me up on sales. Never buy anything full price. Only sales. So I thought, I'll tell you about them. Now, this bra here is famous maker brand, Lady Suzanne. Got this in Filene's Basement in Boston. Nationally known store for its basement. It's crazy down there, really, drives you bananas. But if you put a little energy in it, you'll save a few bucks. This cost me, I don't know, $2 for a good bra. Originally listed for about $6. These underpants, they're not, you can see they're not in the greatest shape, but it was a good deal. I got them in Orbacks. 3 pairs for 99 cents. You can't go wrong. Even if you only wear it for a few months, it didn't cost that much.
I want to tell you about this vibrator. I showed you 2 batteries. I told you it was a present. However, it was a very expensive present. I received this in June. But by the time August came around, I had already used approximately 30 batteries. There isn't a man under the table. There isn't a woman under the table. It's only my vibrator.
Oh, yeah. I thought I was saying, might have said to you before in the car, I've been in this business for some time now. I started at the bottom with the movie one-sheets, and I worked my way up the billboard ladder to the 3-sheet, 6-sheet, 12-sheet, to what I do today now, the 24-sheet, the 30-sheet, and the bleed. Straight seams. No creases. You know, many great artists are not recognized until after they are dead. I said to myself, Mogul, they have one thing that you don't have on your work. They have their name on it. They have a signature.
I realize that I may have to get a backup career, something I can fall back onto in case I don't make it as an artist. I need to give myself some kind of security. So I've been doing a lot of thinking about this because I was trying to figure out what kind of backup career would I choose. And I thought I really should choose something that I like to do better than art. At least something I like to do as well. And I thought, well, I really like to tell jokes. I really like to do that a lot. And everybody knows that comedy is an extremely lucrative profession. I mean, the entertainment industry is really large, really big.
Can you hear me? Can you all hear me? Okay. So the only thing they didn't put at the credit, so that was Dressing Up, which is a 7-minute tape, Takeoff, a 10-minute tape, Mogul is Mobile, you saw in its entirety. And then Comedy as a Backup, which is from 1976. So what I thought might be what I think would be that I want to talk about briefly is like equipment access, because you know, video equipment, it was very expensive and it wasn't that accessible. So I'm just that's all I'm gonna talk about, and you know, we'll talk about other things with Alex. So Dressing Up was made as a student at CalArts with the school equipment. And then in fall of 1973, I joined the Women's Building in its inaugural year. I was there for the first 2 years in something called the Feminist Art Program. So Takeoff, the vibrator tape, and Mogul is Mobile were both made with the equipment at the Women's Building. And just to give you an idea, although many of you are my generation, so might already know, a lot of people were not familiar with video equipment. The women in the Feminist Studio Workshop at the building, I was the only one who had made any videotapes. So I had to convince everyone to buy, you know, because we had a budget, to buy the equipment and how important it was to artists and to feminist artists. Comedy as Backup, which was made in 76, I was no longer really involved with the building. And so that was made in a classroom at the USC Medical School, because there was a bunch of us artists who were friendly with this woman named Sue Ammon, and she ran the media department in the medical school, because I think they would do interview. I don't know how they used it, but actually medical, I found out from Alan Sekula years ago, I think when he first started making video, I don't think they had it in the art department. They had, when he was an undergrad at UCSD, they had it in the medical school also, you know, for for teaching purposes, I guess. So, you know, most artists didn't own this equipment. It was very expensive. I think it was $1,000, $2,000. I'm sure Susan Milano could correct me on that. But, and then people who did own the equipment, usually like it was like a collective, or a lot of people like me were able to get equipment through various kinds of institutions. So in the 80s, for a variety of reasons, I started doing performance art, or stand-up one-woman cabaret style performances. So I really didn't shoot any video at that time. And then by 1990, there was the 8mm video camcorder. That was on the market. It was affordable. It was a portable. And then I finally had a tool to weave my stories with other people's stories. And so I began making diary films, personal documentaries in the 90s, and I continued till the present. And then what I also want to add is, since the 70s, I had also been making, you know, documentary photographs, and I was filming women in a beauty parlor, men in a slaughterhouse, documenting my family on my annual visits back home. So I guess I wanted to say I was interested in other people other than just talking about myself. And the following two excerpts of films are made in the 21st century. One is about choosing not to be a mother, single barren woman, and I thought that was pretty apropos considering the political climate. And the other, my newest film, which was going to Lace is going. Oh, Celine Preciado is here, I believe. Celine, curator at Lace, is going to screen it. It will be a premiere at Lace March 6th, called "Tell Me About Your Mother." And that's a 38-minute film that I just finished a few minutes ago. And that's about, it's comprised of female artists talking about the creative influence their mothers had upon them. And in 2018, I did a film about my my mother's creative influence on me, called Mom's Move. We're going to see a 5-minute excerpt from Single Barren Woman, and then Tell Me About Your Mother, which is basically a 3-minute excerpt.
Lots of chicks over 40 never had a kid.
We're not even trying and don't wish we did.
We're not mentioned in public or given a voice.
We're invisible women who made a provocative choice. Why didn't she have kids? Does it make her feel low?
They're afraid to ask, but dying to know.
Does she live with regret? Does she never beget?
Why didn't she have kids?
Or did she just forget?
Susan, what do you want to talk about?
I decided that I would make some tapes about her, and I could be the director instead of her always being the director.
There was a sense in a way where my lesbianism and my feminism was really the way that I, distinguished myself from her.
So we had a continuous relationship to going and looking at art together.
She learned a wolf whistle from her brothers that I was enthralled by.
We had great conversations on the phone, and we would just talk about stuff, and so I started writing about her.
And it brought my mother and me really, really close together.
All right. Thanks so much, Susan. Before I introduce Alex, and get the conversation started, just let me say that if you would like to ask a question, you can either type it into the chat, which I'll be monitoring, or there's a option to raise your hand, and we'll get to them as we can. So to moderate tonight's discussion, we're very lucky to have Alexandra Juhasz. She's a scholar and media artist, a distinguished professor of film at Brooklyn College CUNY. She makes and studies committed media practices that contribute to political change and individual and community growth. She's the author of numerous books and articles, too many to name, so I'll just focus on one of my favorites, which everyone who's interested in media history should have on their shelf. This is Women of Vision. She also directed a documentary from which this project comes called Women of Vision. Other documentary productions made by Alex include Scale, Measuring Might in the Media Age, Dear Gabe, and Video Remains. She's a producer of the feature films The Watermelon Woman and The Owls, both directed by Cheryl Dunye. And her current work engages with COVID and AIDS, fake news, online feminist pedagogy, and other radical uses of digital media. You can find more about her work at her website, alexandrajuhasz.com. So with that, Alex, why don't you take it away?
Yes, I'm taking it away. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for the invitation, Media Burn and Susan Mogul. What a delight to see those videos and to be in conversation. We've had many conversations before, Susan. You know, I love your work. I love talking with you about your work. So we don't have a lot of time. I wish we had more. I have like 10 questions I want to ask you. I won't get to all of them from just your screening. And thank you so much for those clips. I promise you, and the audience will make time for you as well. So Susan, if you can answer my questions briefly, we can maybe hit a bunch of themes before we open it up to the audience. But the first thing I just have to ask you, because I've always been curious, I love dressing up. I love your humor. Why were you chewing the corn nuts?
Sorry. Okay. Why was I, that was like, do you know how many years ago that was? That was like 73. This is like 50 years ago. I think this is what I remember, or what I think I remember. I think that the whole video was meant to be very obsessive, like just, having this tunnel vision where I'm talking about bargains. And then I thought I would punctuate it with someone who's also obsessively eating corn nuts, or punctuate that. I think that was the idea. And I don't know if it came out of a discussion with Linda Benglis or not. I know I had two or three meetings with Linda, and I would do one take, and then I think I would go back and do another take and something like that, because as most of you know, that, editing wasn't, those early tapes, they're not edited, except for the Mogul is Mobile when I went back to it.
So there you go. That's my second question.
Yeah.
Enough. Now, I mean, I love the idea, for those of you in the audience who weren't making video at this time and are learning through this conversation, what it was to shoot without the possibility of editing, or really, much post work at all. And so you have this percussive corn nut chewing, which I also would have to think your work continues to be interested in your own body and women's relationships to their body. So, something about the eating sort of happens there too. But I wanted to know about the cutting. So thank you so much for letting us know about how you got to all that equipment. That's really important for people to understand how hard it is.
I agree. I also wanted just to add, which I think I left out of saying, is that video, I mean, you're seeing Mogul is Mobile, that was edited from 10 minutes to 4 minutes in 2020, a couple of years ago. But that piece where I'm driving and on a billboard and in the house, all of that was edited in camera. I don't know how we pulled that off, frankly. I worked with a couple of, you saw the credits. I don't know how we did it. I guess we just went from one place to the other and backed it up. I honestly don't remember how we pulled that off. Comedy is a back off. I'm in that classroom and I'm stopping and starting the camera. And so not only was I performing in kind of a quasi-public space, with hoping nobody's going to go into the classroom, I was also stopping and starting the camera, because as the tape goes on, it's a 10-minute piece. I'm putting hats. I keep putting that's another upset. It's kind of like the corn nuts, actually. I'm putting, for each little bit, I'm putting another hat on.
Well, what's so interesting is that your work anticipates and is a precursor, as is true for many of the artists in the room, for things that are now very common. I think it's hard for younger viewers to understand how provocative the choice was to make oneself visible using video. You talk about the provocative choice of being childless, but it was a provocative choice to be visible in that way. Now we see confessional videos as a norm on YouTube, where someone is facing the camera and speaking in the way that you do. How would you think about the shift in media from when it was both provocative and difficult to get the equipment to today, where it's common and easy?
I think people don't know how to edit themselves. Become, I don't think, I think there's, I don't know. I think I'm not a cultural critic, but I think people don't edit. I don't know. I don't think there's the same, anything I say is going to backfire. I could say that, there's not that same intention. There's not necessarily an intentionality. I mean, it's great, democracy is great, and it's great that everybody has access. But that doesn't mean that everybody's making interesting work.
I have no problem with what you're saying. So
go right ahead.
You understand a lot of your work that we saw was about the career or the profession or the work of being an artist. You actually put that forward as a subject matter consistently across the body of work. You've also given us
even recently, even as 22, what becomes a legend most, and talking about, finally having your first solo museum exhibition at the age of 70.
Yes. So part of that work, as I understand it from your work, is your training. And the seriousness with which you did and have and continue to take your profession, even if it's unpaid or underpaid. Was that something that was taught to you as part of your feminist education in art at the Women's Building and by your feminist professors, or has this been a preoccupation of yours or your?
I think that's an interesting question. I think it comes out of being a middle-class Jewish kid, raised where well, first of all, when I was being raised, there was the expectation that you'd go to college and find a husband. I mean, that really was the expectation at that time when I entered. Things radically changed during that time period, but that was the expectation. So I think, like, the thing with the bargain hunting, and it was just like, being I mean, you're kind of raised with this thing about, financial security and having, so I think it comes out of my family background, basically. And then and I never anticipated, I'm not one of those kids that ever thought about being an artist when I was growing up. I didn't decide to be an artist until I was like at the end of my freshman, like my freshman or sophomore year in college, because I got good grades in the art classes I took. It was like, that wasn't something that, I thought I'd be a journalism, I'd major, because I was good at writing, I would be a journalism major. So I think it really comes from kind of that anxiety of being, you know, raised a certain way and then picking something that doesn't quite fit the norm, you know, the family norm. Think more of that.
Right, but your work is constantly breaking norms as you are also sort of worried about that norm breaking. I mean, you're naked in a lot of your
Yeah.
work, and you're naked in your work in your 50s, which again, you know, takes a certain amount of norm breaking. And
But you know what? You know what I have to tell you? There's a home movie. My mother usually was, you know, that was also non-traditional. My mother was a photographer, you know, all, you know, amateur, but very avid and serious about it. And she also did the home movies. Well, we had a big party for my grandparents' anniversary. The party was over, everybody was home, and for some reason, Mom handed the camera to Dad, the movie camera to Dad with all the lights. I was 8 years old, and Mom and I are dancing together, and I flip up my skirt and I pull down my underpants and I flash to the camera. So I had certain impulses even back then. I don't know what possessed me to do that or why I felt free to do that. I have no memory of ever doing that, you know.
Well, to your credit, when you make Takeoff, you keep it under the table.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do.
I want to ask.
That would have been too much.
I mean, it works very well. I mean, I know that that's a response to Vita Okonchi.
Uh-huh.
You want to
Well,
say?
I have to tell you, one time somebody asked me, if you watch the tape in its entirety in 10 minutes, every so often I'm turning my head. The reason that I'm turning my head, I lived in it was a 2-story, it was a building anyway. I was on the 2nd floor. And to get good light for the video, I had the blinds or the curtains open.
Uh-huh.
And I wasn't wearing, you know, sort of like how people dressed for Zoom. So I didn't have anything on, so it would be easier to masturbate.
I am currently dressed for Zoom only from the top up. So.
So I kept looking. So I was looking out the window to check that nobody was looking.
I love the natural lighting and the cornet as percussion. I'm going to ask you one more question, and then we'll see what the room looks like, and I can keep going. But this one is actually very important to me as in the work that I've done and continue to do. The screening series is called Virtual Talks with Video Activists. And I don't know if you consider yourself first and foremost a video activist. And I would love to hear you talk about that. What you do consider your practice, that your profession, your art making.
I'm glad you brought that up because I actually thought when I saw that originally, whenever Adam put it to the thing together, I thought, you know, I was gonna contact him to tell him that I don't think that I'm not a video activist. I would not call myself that. And then so it got me thinking, and I think in terms of, if you want to call it my politics in my work, I think that I would come under the if you want to put a label on it, I'm more like a social, you know, just in general, taking it out of the art world, I would call myself a social, not all my work at that, but a good chunk of my work from the beginning to even, you know, current work, like What Becomes a Legend Most and the Takeoff on the Pacific Standard Time from ad campaign, is that I'm a social satirist much more than an activist. Yeah, I wouldn't consider myself an activist. I mean, I think that's denigrating to activists to be calling me an activist, because I'm not a community organizer. I'm not, you know, maybe you could call me an activist in those years, those first 2 years at the building, where we were organizing conferences, renovating the building, you know, that thing, you know, that I think that at that time, yes, I think I was for those 2 years, but I wouldn't say that but I'm glad you asked that question, because I think, you know, I think it's an insult. I think it's an insult to people who are activists to call me one.
Well, I don't think it's an insult to, there are people in this room, I know some amazing filmmakers and video makers who think of themselves as activist video makers first, but I would always call you a feminist artist. And I think that that is a subset of activism, maybe not quite in the terms that you organizing, building, etc. And I'd like you to talk.
I'm just thinking, you know, okay, if you want to really broaden out the idea of activism, and take it out of like doing community organizing and marching in the streets, and I'm always open to marching in the street, but I'm not going to organize the march. If the work is, I hate to use the word inspire, how about provokes? If the work itself provokes other women or men to think or become activists, or to feel better about themselves, or you know, that you can actually call that, the work can act, maybe it's not activist, but maybe it activates them in some way, whether it's personal or political, because you don't know how your work, what kind of impact your work can have on somebody. And it could be very small. I mean, also, and then one other thing, I know you want to open up. Also, I've taught off and on, and the last place I taught was at Los Angeles High School for the Arts for 5 years. I mean, and having an impact on young people's lives is also, and introducing them to all these different ways of self-expression is, you can call that, you know, activism. I mean, so anyway, this is it. I think it's real. I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think, you know, it's interesting to think about, you know, how we define how we impact people and the different ways that can happen.
And of course, Adam started by, you know, honoring your unique use of humor. It's not that other people don't use it, but it's so definitive of your work. And, you know, one could think about the role of humor and satire in activist projects. Adam, I think you might want, you've unmuted, so I think that might be a signal that you'd like me to transition to the crowd. And so I'm happy to do that, facilitate a question or a comment. If not, I can continue. But if you have something you'd like to say, could you raise your hand, your Zoom hand, or unmute, or whatever you'd like to do, or we can continue. But I'd love to hear from some of you. I know there's a lot of friends of Susan's here, and other people from her and following generations of video artists.
Susan, would you mind talking a little bit about the community of artists that you were part of in the 1970s around the Women's Building and the sort of video scene more broadly?
That's too general a question for me to answer.
Well, where would this have screened? How about that? Something like dressing up. Where would these videos have screened? Jeannie Betancourt mentioned beforehand that dressing up played at the Women's Video Festival.
The first person who screened dressing up in 1973 was Susan Milano in New York.
At the Women's Video Festival?
Pardon
Yes,
me?
it was the Women's Video Festival.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then 73. And that happened totally, I think I told you that. Yeah, I mean, the Kitchen, which was an alternative space in New York, they had some kind of open video night, and I must have sent them I don't know, God knows what kind of video format I sent them in 73. And I sent it, and they screened it on the Monday night because they screened whatever got sent to them. And Susan Milano's friend, Alan so-and-so, I never remember his last name, told Susan that she should look at it and she should show it in the festival. So I think so Susan Milano, all the way 3,000 miles away in New York, showed it. And that was yeah.
Speaking about this, this cross-national conversation among video artists and feminists, a lot of people have become very interested in the video letters that you and others participated in as a way of communication and movement building and community building. Do you want to talk at all about the video letters?
It's also Susan Milano. Susan Milano, because then I knew Susan Milano, and I'm sure she told me about it. And then I don't know if other women did subsequent, but I did it with Sheila Ruth and Pam McDonald. We made it together.
Yeah, I mean, I love that piece. There's a question from the audience, and then I'd like to end with something a little bit more personal, if that's okay. But the question from the audience is from Stephanie, who is asking you, what is your go-to technology today? So you started out with the portable.
I don't
What do you use now?
I don't know. This piece that you just saw is made from footage I shot in 2011 and 12. I don't know what to do. I don't own a camera anymore. My mini DV camera died in 2011. And then the piece that I made about Mom and Me, Mom's Move 2018, uses a lot of photograph and archival footage. So I really haven't done any shooting since 2012, and I have a new project I'm working on, and it's I don't know. I was thinking I might need to do some interviews, and I was thinking about, I don't know if I should buy a camera or not. So I don't have any equipment right now, and I'm trying to learn Adobe Premiere or DaVinci because I'm still using Final Cut Pro 7, and my computer will die soon. So,
I was very taken by the two pieces that you showed that are more recent. One about the decision to not have children, and one an homage to mothers. And I just wonder if you could reflect on the kind of contradiction or tension that's live between both of those impulses and the two pieces that you decided to show us, which are so much about motherhood, but in such different ways.
So I think I know what you're asking. You're asking about the tension between because I have a lot of projects I did about my relationship to my mother. I did Dressing Up in the 80s, and they're all at 3 different stages of my life. One in my 20s, one at the 30s called News from Home, which was a one-woman performance based on 20 years of correspondence from my mother, as well as her clothing. And then Mom's Move, which I did, while I'm in my 60s. One of the things that I think in this new piece, Tell Me About Your Mother, is it's mostly 6 out of the 7 women who are in it are basically boomer women. And I think we were a transitional, and in terms of women, most of those women, I think, except for the first woman, Jemima, and her mother ends up showing up in the film, that they come from a working class background, and Jemima is also from a different generation. But I think that middle class women of my generation who had college educated mothers, there was that tension of admiring the achievements our mothers who were, bright and maybe could have been professionals but weren't. And I think there's that and thinking maybe, and this thing about whether the impulse to not be like, surpass your mother. And I think it's very, I mean, I think you could say that's through all generations, but I think it's very particular where with my generation and the previous generation in terms of, how do you negotiate? How do you achieve what you thought your mother might achieve if she hadn't been a mother? I don't know if that makes any sense to you, but I think that's, and I remember, I think Robin Palanker, who's in that, and I think some of us also, and when I say some of us, women of my generation of a certain class background, maybe thought our mothers didn't realize that maybe some of our mothers were happy in their situation, that maybe it was safer. Because I mean, Robin Palanker, who said, right now I'm very, she's drawing, I'm very glad not to be a mother and not be interrupted. And I think in an initial interview with her, I think at one point she found out her mother was happy not to have been an artist or a professional. Robin herself, sometimes we also as daughters project certain things onto our mothers that maybe aren't really, true. So I just think it's just such an interest. I mean, to me, obviously, it's been such an interesting, subject matter.
Adam, I'm mindful of time. Am I supposed to stop, or can I keep going?
I just want to, okay, I want to say one more thing. In Dressing Up and in News from Home, those are two projects where I was trying to distinguish myself from my mother. In Mom's Move, I'm making it's a much more serious, it's not a comedy. I mean, there's some humorous things in it, but it's not a comedy. It's a much more serious piece. And it's really a meditation on our connection through the photographic image. So so there's a shift that happens over time as one gets older in terms of, how you, reconnecting, seeing your mother in a different way and seeing yourself in a different way.
Well, Adam, can I have one more question?
Yeah, if I could just say a couple of things and then I'll let you close it out.
Sure.
First of all, I just wanted to say Susan Milano is here. She's having difficulties with her microphone, but she just wanted to share her, that she is here and she has things to say, and we're all the worse for Susan not being able to contribute. Hi, Susan. We all love you and thank you for attending.
Susan Milano rocks.
And bye, Helena.
And also, as I mentioned before, this video is being recorded. You can rewatch it or pass along the word. You can find that on our website, and you'll be receiving an email with a link to that in the next few days. But otherwise, I want to thank everybody for coming. Thank you to Alex and Susan, especially Susan, for sharing your work. This has been really special and really fun. And so I'll let the two of you end the evening, and then we'll see you guys in January.
Okay, well, thank you for having us. Thanks to the audience for coming. What a great event. And Susan, just because you moved us towards seriousness, I have one last question for you. It's a serious one. It's so interesting in the piece Mogul is Mobile, where you're, I don't know, 20-something years old, and you say, many great artists aren't remembered until after they have died. You're in your 20s. I've done a lot of work on thinking about how most great women artists are not recognized in their most fertile and active time when they can use that acclaim and tend to get noticed, and in the later stages of their career. How are you thinking about that now in this phase of your career?
Well, I'm happy when I see women who are in their 80s and 90s that finally are getting recognition, though you think it's a kind of a crime. Well, I mean, I've been getting, in my 70s, I had my first museum show. Of course, it's in Warsaw, Poland, and it was a great venue. It's a very, 3 galleries showed my work, both past and present. And then I had a survey at the, Austrian Film Museum, 2 nights, devoted to my films. So I'm pleased. I'm pleased about that. I'm not sure, and and then I've done I've done 2 satirical, photo-based works, satirizing the older, the position of the older female artist. So I don't know what to say. I mean, now kind of older women have become a little bit hip. I mean, I'm not going to, I don't, I'm not a whiner, I'm not going, I don't know I don't really know what to say. It's like, I have strong feelings about it, but I'm not an angry, I'm not an angry person. So I think that's the, having humor and satire, being able to satirize situations and have a sense of humor. And I guess the other thing is I've never made work that was in the mainstream to begin with. But yeah, I'm not sure.
Thank you for that answer. I think there's a lot of people in the room for whom what you're saying is resonant, and appreciate your honesty. So thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody who came. That meant a lot. It was really nice to see so many people.
Thank you so much, Susan.
And Adam,
All right.
I have something I want to ask you after everyone leaves.
Okay.
Quickly.
All right. So we can
Thank you,
end
Alex.
the evening there.
Thanks
everybody for coming.
Thank
Thanks so
you.
much, Alex and Susan. That was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.